So behind me, I'll move this big thing out of the way. There we go. I have some buildings which I have been painting for the last couple of weeks. 15mm sci-fi buildings, and they have lids, roofs even, like so, sitting the top. And I've been doing various airbrushing on them. And so some people have been sort of following this along, and I'm at the point where I'm doing pin washing on them using these Griffin Alkyd oils, which I've had for 15 years or so, and they last forever, even though I've been squeezing them out a lot. These are Alkyd colours, so they're meant to dry a lot quicker than normal oils. I don't know whether they do, because I do have some other oils, I think, but they do the job for me. So I've squeezed them out into a little pot. Oops, I've hit the mic. A mixture of the lamp black and the burnt umber. And I'm using for doing pin washes, which means I just use a small brush and I go around the details on these, around the edges of the platform, into all the little nicks and crannies and the panel lines. Now, if I was doing this on for scale modelling, I'd be really spending an awful lot of time being ultra careful with every pin wash, you know, on every bolt, and then making sure that the bolt's clean afterwards on top and that the pin wash is just around the edge. But given I'm now at the point where I'm just sort of whizzing through these for wargaming, this isn't for showcase modelling, I'm speed pin washing, spin washing, coined a new phrase that won't catch on, but that's the idea, and I shall just talk about that by zooming in just while I'm working. And so the time is now 8:45, so I'll probably spend an hour at this. So you're welcome to watch as I do it and see how I use the technique. I'm no expert, as I say. I don't do scale military modelling stuff. This is just for war games, so it's to a certain grade pin washing. But I wanted to do it because I've always had the oils. I use them a lot on vehicles, and I thought, why not just whiz through here as well and use the same technique. And yesterday while I was doing this, I was trying out some of the Tensner Chrome, which are kind of acrylic versions of oil washes, which you can strip off. They provide an adjustable pigment remover. But with oils, instead of using that kind of remover, you just use oil thinners, which I have a little pot here of oil thinners which I mix in. So I have one clean pot of oil thinners that helps you remove the pin wash, and then one pin wash, which is just like a squidge of the black, lamp black and the burnt umber in there. And it's filthy stuff. I mean, it smells, I quite like the smell. It's kind of linseed oily mixed with thinners, although it's low odour thinners. It's still quite strong. And yeah, let's zoom down then without further ado, and hopefully people can hear me. I won't bother. I can see that the mic thing's working down there, so it should be good. Let's go in. So I've done someone here already because I was just sort of working through it before I kicked into action here. And I can show you, this is where it's going to get awkward for me because it's very difficult to sit around the edge of the model while I'm working it. But you can see there's a slight glossness to almost the entire building because it's had a slight gloss spray on it. And I have done some pin washing, and I went really rather quickly around the edge of that door frame and things. And so if we go into there and I'm using a bit of the clear thinners, I can strip some of that off. So I look at that and I think, okay, that's a bit of a bodge. Let's clean it off there. So using the neat thinners on the brush, you can just sort of push it around. It's never going to be perfect again, unless you really persevere. But every time you just load a little bit of extra onto the brush, to be using a 000 Tamiya brush there, it just lets you sort of pull a little bit more off and clean up inside there where I've put too much pin wash. Now ideally, when you're doing it, you kind of go around in stages, and you leave it for a few minutes while the oil has dried before you do that removal stage. And again, as I said, this isn't for perfection. This is just Wargames terrain, so I'm not too worried about making this absolutely perfect. But I've now picked up some more of the pin wash, and I could see actually that I hadn't gone along the top of the door frame in there. It's not a massive section of it, but it just sort of runs along the edge there. And again, you can see, because I'm just a bit slapdash, you can see a little smear of the oil wash. Some of it's just sort of capillary actioned along the back of the door, top of the door there, but there's a bit that's smeared down there. Now I could leave that for 5 minutes, let it half dry, then come back with the pin wash again, or you can just do it straight away with smear it off with a bit of the thinners on your brush if you're in a kind of a hurry like I am at the moment. Other areas where I've done kind of a bit of a pin wash is in the edges of those steelwork pieces on the front there. And as you can see, I've just done it fast. I've kind of like blob in the corners, and I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time doing the whole thing. It's just for a little to hint at the effect. And the other area that's had a lot of action is this side bit. Now when you're doing this so slapdash like me and whizzing along, you the end result is actually half looks like a sort of a mucky oil stain, and half kind of like a pin wash, which is just to highlight and accentuate the cracks. So you're getting two for the price of one here, as in, because you're doing it, if you're doing it like me on this building, it's just for speed. I'm not too worried about the fact that, you know, I've smeared over the edge here. Look at that piece there. But I am now going on with a bit of clear thinners, and you can see how easy it sort of wipes back off to rein in my rather rapid, poor control of the pin wash as it went on. But yes, as I said, I'm not pro grade, but I can see that I've gone over the edge on that corner. And to sort that out, I just use this little bit of thinners on there, and it's sort of cleaned it up. But again, it's sci-fi. This is for a war game. No one's going to be casting a close eye on it. These areas where, look at that, I just took it off the front of the door handle, and you know, no one's going to really have noticed that. But that's how you do it. You use the thinners to strip off where you don't want it. So like there's a little bit on that crate, and again you could argue didn't really need to do that, but fair enough, it's, you know, the job's done. So an area I haven't done is around on these doors, so I can start that now. One thing is, when you're doing a big piece of work like this, is the thinners are obviously evaporating constantly in there. You end up with more of a sludge, and you have to decant some extra thinners. So if I come back out, I'll just use one of these pipette things, pick up a little bit in there, splodge it in. The thinners are now mixing. I mean, you could use a brush to do it, or a cocktail stick, whatever, just to mix that messy stuff so it's still a thin pin wash, and it's half brown, half black. Again, you could use different grades of oils, like a Payne's grey or something, instead of a lamp black if for white, but you could just speed it as well. So here's a quick example of speeding it on. So there's that vent there, and if I just load up the brush, probably the brush is a bit small for it, like this, I can just sort of spin over it. And obviously, like any wash, no, it's not. This isn't a special technique or anything. It finds its way into the grills rather easily. And then the next thing is to, yes, exactly, Graham. Yeah, if it just drips anywhere, who cares really? It just looks like oil. So Then you can see a little bit more of the capillary action when I drop it around the edges of these pieces and then around the edge of the actual grill. You know, when you're doing this, it's up to you how careful you want to be and how messy, depending on the end result. And so if it's a 1/35th scale Sherman tank and you're after perfection for modelling showcase in a magazine, you will be taking an awful long time making sure you pin wash in just the most appropriate places. If you're doing buildings like this for a war game, it's just really just for effect, and no amount of realism really matters to me, just as long as it's on there and it's providing some dirt and some light and shade. But obviously I care, otherwise I wouldn't be putting time and effort in. Now again, the proper way of doing it is possibly to wait a little while for the oil to slightly dry. Obviously the oil's not drying much at all because it takes a few days for oils to dry. Or if you're into historical artwork, it takes 300 years for oils to dry on some of those paintings. They've found vintage paints still moist with their linseed oil or what have you under a canvas that's sort of ancient. So when they dig my body up and they find all my burial goods, science fiction terrain, they'll go, look at these oils, they're still not bloody dry. What was he doing? Anyway, so now I'm doing proper pin wash again. Now I've just taken some of that off for speed on the highlighted areas on there. And obviously the other thing which is worth mentioning is that it all looks very shiny and unusual when you put it straight on, because it's very liquid, and for the most part lots of the oils do sometimes dry with a shine on them, especially and I've always struggled with this, and again I don't know if people land on this by luck or what, but I'm using proper Daleroni or something low odor thinners with proper oil paints here, but sometimes it seems to dry a bit gloss, like there's a weird shine on there, like I've used too much thinners or something. But once it's dull coated, it's all of that's lost when it's dull coated. Right, it's just out of view there, sorry, because it's a bit tricky to get this in view without it falling over. That's not going to help me. I'll tell you what I have got, just for a momentary break. Put the lid on there, just something to look at while I'm hunting. I have a 4-pound weight. That's not going to slide away. That's better. I've got a bit of control now, so I don't have to actually hold on to the it at the same time. So yeah, pin washing around the edge there. Oh, the other note with pin washing is that you, as these they've had a sort of a blast of they've had a blast from, I'll get it out in the end, gloss, Vallejo gloss varnish through the airbrush, which should mean that the capillary action works a bit quicker to sort of draw the oil wash and thinner wash along all of the edges. also, because I'm taking my time with these at my grade of skill, I'm taking my time here. But they're not done, as in once this is on, it will start looking quite nice, but they still need the chipping, and that's, in my way of working, I do the chipping after I've done the pin washes. I reckon I could be doing this a lot quicker with a bigger brush, but I don't mind. I'm aiming to do an hour or so a night this week on this project, so I'll keep it going. I always tend to dry with a much richer and deeper colour than acrylics and tend to have a sheen. Yeah, that's true. It's like an unusual little sheen. I did some Warhammer Vampire models earlier in the year, airbrushed, and the oil wash is perfect for the wings, because if you've airbrushed the wings, the oil wash gives it a nice finish. And oops, and it did leave a sheen afterwards, but once the a dull coat of acrylic, dull coat was on there, they were all sorted. So this sign, I'm going around the edge, which is just sort of griming it up in there and underneath. And I don't mind too much if I get a bit messy around there, because I'll clean it up afterwards, and I'll do rain sort of grime and things too. The problem with the MDF, because this is MDF building, is that I maybe should have done 2 coats of gloss or something, because it's still quite absorbent, and the pin wash is less likely to be drawn off. With the, because it absorbs into the wood, you really can't get it off very easily, even with a good amount of the thinners. But I've splashed it on there deliberately, quite a lot of it, to give it a go at taking it off. Those bits I'm kind of watching in the camera, because I can't really see from this angle. So that's Monday nearly over, isn't it? That's lucky. In the general sort of space-time continuum today, I noticed that it was a faster Monday than normal, so we must have slipped through some sort of universal time accelerated area of the universe as we span through on the globe today. It's definitely a quicker Monday than normal, and there's no way to explain that, unless you're time aware, like myself, of course. Right, I mean, and obviously I've been doing this for what, 5-10 minutes now. That's enough time that some of this will have dried on there, and I'm just looking at other areas that need another bit of splat. You can see how badly I've done it around there, because really, with a pin wash, I should have done a more of a consistent look. It looks almost just like there's an oil stain along the top, like there was oil in the container and it seeped out, rather than it being a neat little pin wash. But I'm going to get a brush now. I'm going to use clean that in thinners. It's always best to do that when you're using oils. I'm going to use a slightly larger brush. I'm trying to find a good, decent one. I mean, that's not too bad. Graduate. Oh, I'll take that out of the lid too. This is going to be fun with pin washing, because that has got a nice sheen on it, and this will pin wash neatly around the edges. I'm going to do that after I've just done a bit more on here. Yeah, John at GZG is a Time Lord. People don't realise that, which is why, obviously, he was such a far future thinking person with various rules, and the fact that he started doing 15 mil miniatures long before the general population realised it was the one true scale. And yeah, he's definitely aware of the passage of time, particularly when shipping to the US. Ground Zero Games have an ability to get a package of 15 mil sci-fi miniatures through your letterbox before you do the final pay here click, because he is aware of future orders. You don't realise it, of course, until you're opening the package with a sort of your eyeballs popping out, because it's that moment. Will my wife see me when I open this package? Will I get in the door? Will I be at home, or the stupid driver of the delivery thing? No, I mean, I'm not saying all drivers of delivery companies are, but we have lots of issues with them dropping parcels off at other addresses nearby that just seem to be totally random. I've got one person that lives a whole close away from me in a block of flats, and they get, because they're a 32, they get the same bloody they get my parcels. They get my 15 mil sci-fi delivered there. And it's quite incredible. But yes, John is a good fast shipper of models. Yeah, he's delayed basically when he's not at one of his casting machines that is also a time machine. He the time slippage does go elsewhere, and that's why I had a quick Monday instead of a terrible slow Monday today. So you can see I'm using this, and as soon as you get a bit too much paint on there, you have to go back and get some more enamel thinners. And that's the main thing here as well about enamel thinners, is that they don't react with acrylics. But if you go too far, it's like anything. It's like any moisture, even on acrylic paint that's dried. You know you're going to end up, if you rub and rub and rub and rub with any liquid water or thinners over acrylic, it will eventually cause the paint to flake or rub or crack with the amount of moisture. Even though acrylic tends to be good like that, it's quite resistant against moistness. In fact, I had a friend years ago who just reconnected up to me, an old friend called Keith locally, and I always remember he was a good artist and a miniature painter, and he would do people's leather jackets using Citadel acrylic paints. And when he first showed me this, so this was like, I want to say, yes, this was 30 years ago. He said, "Oh, I use those Games Workshop paints to do, Fields of the Nephilim or something drawn onto the back of a leather jacket for a friend." And I thought, that's not going to last. That's just for modelling hobby things. You need something better than that. Of course, these jackets lasted forever, in all kinds of weather, and didn't crack on the leather either. I think you had to occasionally touch them up, but that's a big plus one for Games Workshop paints lasting for years on the back of a leather jacket and being a good tool for that. So here you go, I'm using this big brush again up here. You can see these areas have had overspill of the oil, and with a good sort of frisky rubbing, don't know how else to describe it, and with a good delicate brushing, you can see I can remove the oils from the raised areas, leaving it in the leaving the oil in the detailed areas. But of course, because I've gone rather messily on there, there's not really much to be salvaged where, into the corners and things. That's just a messy stain in there, and I'm happy with that because it just looks badly weathered. Right, and oil paints, and obviously with the enamel thinners, they're happy over acrylics, but you can't go back over with oils again. Now, it's kind of half true. You could go back over with oils again and thinners, but you would end up picking up everything that was on there before. It would all start to blend together, and the enamels, the thinners would start to pull off the existing stuff. But you can go over with chipping, acrylic-based chipping for weathering effects, because the acrylics again are happy to go over the oils without knocking them off. You could probably do something like, you could probably go over with an acrylic spray of varnish, and then use oils again, maybe before. Yeah. Anyway, here I think this is going to just not be brilliant, but I may get some other oils to weather up this side that are a bit lighter, because this is probably not going to pull off. Oh, I was a bit nervous that it had soaked into some of the wood there. But it is coming off, because this has had a punch from, as I said, I used the Vallejo Mecha varnish, which is a gloss varnish, which they designed to be used on Gundam sort of models, but used on anything. It's just acrylic varnish, really, with a satiny finish. But yeah, that's now made that look a little less harsh. It's just sort of blended it in and made my bodge job look like dodgy weathering and grime around the edge of that logo. I can see, again, if I'm being really careful, I can see bits down there where more could be done to remove and smooth and just spread around the oil, so it's not on the main door too much. Yeah, I think I was saying earlier, really, there's that risk if you do this very heavy-handed and don't spend a lot of time, making sure it is pushed off the raised areas. It will just look like a big sort of oil stain over everything, and you're kind of losing the benefit of the pin wash, which is to make the details pop by making you look at that and go, okay, I can see there is an edge around that panel on there, but again, that looks just like a stain in there, but I could just trim that down. I've pushed that down and off, and it's less stainy and more pin wash. But overall, you're getting two for the price of one, really. You're kind of, if you're happy that it's giving it a kind of a greasy, grimy look at the same time as highlighting the areas and giving things a bit of a pop, then all good. And those are looking about as far I want to go. I mean, I could really go to town and say, oh, look, there's one there. That's just use this clear. Get off that one there too. Make sure it's on none of those raised bits. Yeah, so it's an exercise which is a bit unusual for miniature hobby painting generally, is to that you're removing paint as much as you're putting it on for the effect. Oh, just a moment. Live action. There's a cup of tea, I think. Hello, thank you. There is a cup of tea. Thank you very much to my wife. And I need one of those lights over the door, like a big red lamp that goes on and says live. But then next to it, another light that says tea, please, or something, No, I wouldn't do that. But right, so I've heard that Interstellar had to borrow his skills for the film's special effects, definitely. And here's another train spotter slight detail for anybody viewing. The There's a 15mm sci-fi company. Oh, I've gone on with too much thinner there. In the UK called Old Crow Models, and Jez runs that. But his day job is he works in a modelling company, but he contracts out to do films, and he makes little bits and pieces like things like this, but obviously on a movie scale. And he worked on Gravity when that was in production, and he did Sandra Bullock's attachments to the spacesuit. So by that, all those kind of little small sort of things around this kind of size that are valves and connectors and everything that you'd normally, and they usually do them in those really nice. They look like shiny red, blue coloured aluminum or aluminium if you're British like me, and yeah, so he did that, but he said he had a lot of fun because obviously he didn't stitch together the suits or anything. He's just the sort of materials guy that does the knobs and switches and things on suits. But he said that they got to within like a week of production, and I don't know who it was. This was just one of those tales you hear that he said, and when we had a chat about it, he said the director or producer or whoever it was that was in charge of costume said, we need a new spacesuit for Sandra, because what they had done, they had been given a brief of, you need to make the spacesuit look like a real one. Get a NASA suit image spec, look at it, look at the sizes, look how puffy and large it is. And of course, when they came to put her in it a week or so before production started, she looked like Marshmallow Man. And the director said, no, we need her to look hot with tight lines and accentuated curves. Go away, redo this. So of course, that meant a huge amount of extra work for Jess from Old Crow Models, as much as probably not as much work as for the people who have to restitch a whole new spacesuit in a week. And of course, they had to make it tighter and more close-fitting for her. And he had to redo a load of his work, but obviously he probably would have been able to take some of the things off it. Rather than having to remake and remold everything, he'd probably already cast up copies. So I've been on this side earlier and made a mistake there and splashed up some oil pin wash, and that's just smearing it up there really and making sure it's not too heavy. So really there's not much to do on this one. I'm just cleaning it off some of the outer edges, some of the pin wash, but keeping it sort of grimy. This is going to take some nice weathering and chipping. This will go nice and rusty. That's quite a feature on there. The other thing I might do is pick up some oil wash and just streak down here and just blacken this generally. This is MDF, and I've mentioned before, this is my least favourite part of these kits from Sarisa Precision, are these pipe works on the side. And I think if I ever build another one, I'll not put them on, but I've just got this terrible sort of desire to complete the kit when I build it, and this is something I don't particularly like, because it doesn't look it just looks like three sandwiched together bits of MDF, but I think I probably say that, and in fact when it's on the table, and you're at table height and you're wargaming on it, it will just look like a pipe on the side and will look quite realistic. When I look up close, I just see three bits of sandwiched MDF making that pipe, and it doesn't work for me. So this is where I'm really going on heavy, and it's no longer a pin wash here, it's going on more like a general overall weathering. Yeah, sexy spacesuit. that's what they thought, didn't they? We want men to watch this, and in the downtime drama bits, when the man's attention is lost, they want to see Sandra Bullock there in a tight spacesuit. They don't want to just see someone in a big puffy marshmallow style 1970s spacesuit. It's got to look slightly sci-fi. I think that was one thing that Gravity was aiming for, wasn't it? That sort of realism. And that small factoid clearly means that they didn't go for quite realism, because they did want a sexy spacesuit for her. Probably given up a trade secret there. So, there's not much more to do on this, really. Just going into the bottom of the window frame areas. Yeah, I think they are air conducting, sort of. I mean, whatever factories have on the side, I suppose whoever made the original kit had in mind a certain look. And as a company, Sarisa have standardised on that pipe style. So whichever one of their kits you buy, you will, with the warehouse styling to them, when they've got those pipes on, they all have the same. They're exactly the same build. But it's MDF, so there's a sacrifice there, and I mean, that's what I've been doing. That's why I kit bash them with so many other bits and pieces on them. You can't really expect an MDF kit to be that's a relatively cheap, good entry level price for a little MDF kit. This factory, can't expect it to be the best thing ever, with every detail being high precision. I mean, if you look at that pipe there, that resin one, it has got lots of detail up and panelling on the side, and obviously that's what you'd like on the side here. But that would be a more expensive kit. I could go out. I could either kit bash from tubes and bits and pieces, something that would look like a more sci-fi tube, or just leave it on there, and it's lost generally in the detail, isn't it? It's easy to get, as a wargamer, it's easy to try and get closer and closer to a subject for sort of perfection, and actually you don't need to. Once it's all on the table, it all looks great. These areas in the window, I'm never going to come back to in terms of weathering, really. They're just taking some of this black wash, and they're going to have glass behind them in the form of some acetate sort of sheet, or from some packing sheets, plastic that I've got, rather than put it in a landfill. And I wouldn't, for pin wash wise, I'm really not pin washing at all with these. I'm just slashing it on to darken the window frames. Right, so I did put that one there as an example. There's sort of a streak down there. Yeah, someone could do that, couldn't they? And that's something like an Old Crow type company would maybe be able to do that. Obviously, John at Ground Zero Games, he does obviously do he does do kits. So that overspill's nicely cleaned up, and the weathering's just gone all subtle where I've just used the thinners. So, and I've got low odor De Larone thinners just in a jar over here. This section looks kind of like I need to just whiz around and just make it look like less harsh, more blended oil. Spreads it around a bit, but at the same time it does sort of blend, because oils are transparent, obviously. It's the other benefit of them. When they build up heavily, they're not, so the transparency is down, but they have a degree of transparency, which means you're benefiting from that as well, because they're very thinnest. They are nearly transparent on here, so it just does just look like a very slight dusty dirty sheen that's left behind. And that door down there, there's a bit underneath the handle, you know, what do you do with it? Do you do that or not? I've done it now. Oh yeah, I went on that switch work down there and I put some wash in there. I'm not even going to bother pulling any of it off. I've just let the dark wash go in between all the bits and pieces on that there. Oh, on the side of that door frame though, look, there's a big chunk. Bit thin as on there, and that's cleaned up nicely. Now I had a friend in Brighton, and for the life of me, I can't remember. He went by a name of something like Stig, I think it was. Before the Stig was on the big or even on. This was because this was 30 years ago. Yeah, probably been about 30, 32 years ago. And he solely used oils on nearly everything he did. And he used a different technique, and I tried it once. I found it a bit too hard. But he put oils on neat. He didn't even thin them. And he would do them on 28mm character models. You know, even Games Workshop. I know he did some nice sort of Necromunda models and things. Some of those early ones when they first came out as well. But he had Grenadier models, the ones I saw. They were sort of female Grenadier future warriors. And the way he'd put the... So he'd use enamel paint to do like the normal flesh on a model. And then he would put neat oils on. And then with those neat oils, he would use a sponge and literally just pull them off the model with a sponge, wiping, you know, like this, in the same way that you're removing the pin wash from areas that you want to tidy up the surface and leave it in the cracks. But he did it with a thick stuff, and it actually looked remarkably good. And the reason for it was the oils were ultra vibrant, and it kind of knocked me off my feet a bit when I saw them, because I looked and the flesh tones of things he managed to get perfect. But also because it was oils and he knew what he was doing with these sort of various different terracotta and umber and colours, sepias, he was able to do a really good effect with it. I tried it once. I tried doing it once, like proper oil painting on a model, and it didn't turn out too bad, but I didn't want to go there again, where you're not even really thinning it. Oh, I'm out of the camera. I was just taking some of the oil off this step, cleaning the doorstep. Oh, and that was the other area around the back, where that's definitely, I'm just going to blend all of that in so that it doesn't look like such a harsh edge, like oil is oozing out. And also no harm in spreading it up and down a little bit to dirty up some of the text there, so it's not so bright white. Yeah, so just in terms of why I'm doing this, I used to, for years, I've got a YouTube channel that's been up and running for like 10 years. I did a did stuff a long time ago. And when I first started, I just had a digital camera but it was a digital tape video recorder, Sony one I think, and I did a cockpit glass painting tutorial for Battletech. So this was probably, I probably did that about 13, 14 years ago. Then it was about 10 years ago I got onto YouTube and I started the channel. And I always put things on there, but I've never tried to. You have to be social media savvy, don't you? You have to really build the relationships and get a lot of viewers on there interested. And I never really do that very well. So after 10 years, I've had only about 2,000 subscribers. But I've always maintained I kind of just don't really care about big numbers or anything, because I'm just doing it for fun. And that's how I'm just trying to keep doing it now. But what's happened recently, what's different, is I'm streaming now. So this is interesting, different for me, because on the one hand, it's more intense when I'm doing stuff like this, because I've got to do it on show. And all your mistakes are showing, and you can see just how basic I am, and causing issues that I should have never gone back on there. But at the same time, it's easier for me to get the material live because I just stream, and then worry about it later, as in, was the content any good or not? I don't know. With all the warts and all in it, mistakes and things that you think, oh, maybe that wasn't quite as good as I thought. And you're also slightly worried. I mean, it's a general anxiety of that someone is going to say, oh, you're just rubbish. Why are you doing it like that? You've missed a bit. And yeah. And oils do take a lot of practice. So yeah, I've been practicing them for 10 years. I've had oils in my old house. Practicing oil for 15 years. But I don't do it all the time, so that's my excuse. I mean, normally I'm painting with mixture of acrylics on miniatures for wargames, so it's not really a lot of oil work going on. But I've used them for, I've studied the technique and I've used them and I know sort of what I'm doing. Which brings me sort of to a point about it really, and that's that there is a divide really that's getting narrower between the military modelers and the wargame modelers, because back in the early days of Games Workshop, and when they first started to bring out big tanks, plastic ones a lot cheaper, obviously if they had that sort of big, I can't remember what it was called, but they've always had that big tank with the tracks that go up around. It looks like a bit like a Mark 1 or whatever, British World War One tank. And but then more and more their tanks started to come out, and initially even workshop, even studio painters of them did this really weird thing, and it was because they're used to painting miniatures where they were highlighting up edges. They would highlight the edges up on these tanks, even their studio painters. So you could probably find some examples of Games Workshop magazines with tanks in that look neon, because they would go to the edge of a panel, a big flat panel, and then they would think they were doing a 40k Space Marine shoulder pad and say, okay, I'm going to have to put a really bright edge to this. And unfortunately that doesn't look right on a big tank, because it will just look neon. You just think, why have you gone to an edge of a panel that may be like a dark blue, and then do a bright white edge, and that's not how lighting naturally works on large objects. And of course you get away with that with sort of eye candy style Space Marines back then. But of course that moved on because the advent of the internet brought the kind of military modelling world and the Games Workshop world, well, not literally crashing together, but certainly brought them together in terms of people like me and others that are more on the military, more on the wargamer side, looking and going, oh look, I'll pick up a wargame military magazine, or I'll watch this guy on YouTube and learn how to do pin washes or other techniques, and then I'll use that on a fantasy model or something. And sometimes it works, and sometimes the results aren't that great. But because what you find with the military modelling world is when you look at one tank someone's done, they say, oh yeah, that one took me 70 hours. And of course, in the wargaming world, you want to finish your entire army in 70 hours. You don't want to spend all that time on one model that's going to get bashed around on the table. So it's finding that compromise, isn't it, between how much hard work do you want to spend making something perfect for a war game. So I did do a little bit on these walls as well. Let's just sort of grime them up. And you can see there that again, using the thinners is blending it away, but also leaving behind a sort of uneven look to the wall, which is good, instead of it just looking one colour. And I also went on the graffiti with some of it as well. It's just darkened it down along the edges and things and makes it look less like a stuck-on. And of course that, when you do a little bit of weathering on here as well, I could do some chipping. It will even do even more for making that look sort of natural on there. Rhino, that was it. No, not was it the Rhino? Yeah, it was the Rhino, the one they did with the big tracks that covered the entire surround of the edge of the tank, exposed tracks, which of course in the modern realism world, people realise if you expose your tracks you're prone to more damage. Just having some tea. So that's kind of done for that. Yeah, there's probably some other bits that could have gone on, but it's looking grimy enough for me. And obviously I'm still going to do some rusting and chipping on there and some more stains as well. But that's the... yeah, because some areas down there I could have gone on the wall a bit more. I didn't really do much on the wall. Since I've got some left, I'll just smear some up there. This bit of wall here, just out of interest, is it was not part of the kit, that wall. There was another window there, and I just had some plasticard wall, and I thought, shall I do it brown? I thought, no, I'll just do it as like someone's painted the wall grey, because it's sort of modern looking. So now it just looks sort of grimy looking. And you can see again, you just sort of pull down with the thinners and it cleans it off a bit. Of course what's happened now is my thinners has gone quite dark because I've been cleaning the brush so much in it that the thinners is nearly as dark as the nearly as pigmented with oil paint as the oil paint pin wash mix that I had as well. That's what I could do. I could do along the edges down here where it meets the ground. So with all these things, the more you look, the more you see, and you think, oh, I could just do that as well. And does it really need it? Probably not. So that will take to touch dry a couple of days, and to completely dry 230 years, if science is anything to go by. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, I would probably leave something like this about 3 or 4 days before I bothered putting any kind of final varnish on a model. Lemon Russ. That's it, right? Yeah, Lemon Russ. Yeah. Oh, well, thanks, Hewlett. Yeah, that's the Lemon Russ. So I get my £4 weight out of the way. That's probably gone right through the mic because the mic's on there. Sorry if you heard that crunching away. And look at this, you can see it's got quite a nice shine on this because this is the MDF is underneath and it's hidden underneath all of this. There's some metalwork, plastic, resin, metal, a little bit of wood exposed there, but it's got a nice solid gloss on there. I'm going to make myself a cleaner. I'm going to put the thinners back into the pin wash that are dirtied up so as not to waste the clean thinners, and then I'm going to get some more oil thinners from in there and decant. These are about 2p, these pipettes each on eBay. You can buy them in packs of like 30 or 40. I've had some for years. I just sort of never seem to run out. Terrible use of landfill though to get rid of them, so I try and keep them going. But of course if you've got a glass one and you sucked acrylic paint up in there, you'd never get it clean. So what's the pin wash looking like? It's looking filthy in there. But because it's oils, it's just all still in there ready to mix together. And it's just really runny, mucky stuff. Burnt umber and black. Might put a bit more in there. I'm going to put some more burnt umber into it with the Griffin Alkyd. And just, again, I can never work without cocktail sticks. Suddenly if I run out of cocktail sticks, just to be able to do things just like that and just smidge a bit off there, things get a bit annoying for me. I have to have cocktail sticks, which I keep mentioning in every video. I watched, and I will, I need to do a video soon of the channels I watch, and I will sort of present half hour of me talking through other channels I watch, because some of them are nothing to do with wargaming, but they're just brilliant channels. Like there's a guy in Australia, and all he does is respray Matchbox cars, mostly Matchbox. I think he does Corgis cars as well. So these cars, and Hot Wheels, I think, as well. So these vehicles are sometimes 30 years old, and he specialises in. He's got a PO box you can send to, and he specialises in people finding an old toy car in their garden, or there's always a story. So someone will say, they'll write in and there'll be a crushed little yellow truck, Matchbox number something or other, and it will be full of mud and it'll have cracked windscreen, one wheel missing, wheels rusted up. And he could, on some of them they're not always expensive models. You could go on eBay and get a better condition one for just a couple of dollars or quid, but he doesn't. He restores these old ones, sometimes sends them back sort of free of charge to the person that sent them in, because they'll send him a couple. But it's fantastic viewing watching these Matchbox cars. But he has some it's always this crossover, and I was mentioning it earlier with a crossover with I don't want a big brush. I'll start with a big brush. I've got too much ink, too much oil on there. So I shall recompose myself because I've got too much oil on there just as I was going to dive in. So it's the crossover, which is interesting. Military modelling, 1/35th scale, has got some of obviously the best techniques for making things look realistic. But when you watch them, even though they do some brilliant things, sometimes I look and I think if only they used the technique from wargaming to dry brush that or do something, they could have got there a bit quicker. Sometimes you see it, and it's. But no doubt they are the pros. You know, they're winning competitions with this high grade realism. But then this chap that in Australia that does the Matchbox cars, he does some. You know, he shortcuts things a lot. Still comes up with obviously he makes these things look like they're out of the packet, brand new after he's finished. You know, it's come crushed out of a sand pit in a garden that 30 years it's spent rusting away, and then it looks like something that's come off the shelf. However, he does some interesting shortcuts, like uses silver pens to do the chrome. And again, you look at it and you think, oh, I don't know really that he needs to use that. If he had some silver acrylic or something, he could get away with it. But, you know, they've developed their own techniques and they get there. And it looks good. So, you know, he knows what he's doing. But it is interesting sometimes, the crossover. And I guess what I'm doing down here is a bit of crossover from the 1/35th modelling world, in that I'm doing pin washes rather than what you would do in the world of wargaming. Normally, you'd sort of be highlighting up to edges and more dry brushing and highlights, and less of this sort of shading. But you know, modern wargame is now all about shades and washes and things as well. I can zoom into that so you can actually see what I'm going to do. You can see again the pin washes are just going in, and it's quite a nice experience actually, in that you can in many ways you kind of let the oil paint drag its way into the edges, and then you know if you've made that mistake, you're going to be able to get rid of it by using the thinners afterwards. And bits like that I like that hatch, I'll take a bit more care with. The hatch is from Ground Zero Games in their building add-on kits. So on that panel line that's on it's on the MDF, that's a piece of MDF underneath there. Been a bit rough and ready with that, haven't really cared, but we'll be able to remove that to improve it. You know, I think the other thing about wargaming, maybe it's just maybe slight speculation, but probably might have some truth in it, is that people wargaming tend to, like I'm doing here, rushing. So I just made a mess on top of that panel there because I'm rushing through it. And if I can improve the lights so it's less reflective. Not really. No. I reckon if I hold it at an angle, that's better. Yeah, that's better. So I'll get this oil tub out of the way. Come up a little bit higher. That's a bit more easy to see now. Yeah, they tend to, I think sometimes wargamers, unless again they're the sort of top painters of the world that are doing things to get a golden demon or whatever the equivalents are in different modelling circles, we're rushing more. We're like, I want to get this ready for a game. I'm not too bothered about this looking showcase because I'm more interested in getting this to the game. But say it's sort of different with streaming for me, as in I'm just quite happy to take some time, but don't need to take an inordinate amount of time. And don't need to do every bit. I mean, I've come back on here and I've just seen, oh, I haven't gone around those two edges, but, you know, who cares if I hadn't really? It's still good enough as it is. I haven't gone around the edge of this thing here. I actually think I could do with more light here. I think I put a lot of oil paint on that one. So yeah, it's building up around the edge, and it's quite sharp and distinct, isn't it? And you know, immediately you can tidy up bits quickly, but obviously the best bet is to leave it to dry a little bit before you do that sort of thing, and use the thinners to get it off like I've been doing before. So I'll just make sure that there's enough. Yeah, that thinners is just evaporating, going up my nose. And I had added extra oil in there with the brown. So I'm going to go on to the major section and zoom right into it so you can see the action. So the important bit, the key bit that shows up. So maybe I should take a bit more time and care. I did do some silver dry brushing on here, so you can see the edge looks like it's a little bit weathered because I did some silver dry brushing. Again, that's a shortcut really. And again, in the military modelling world, there's a kind of I've left that bloody top. In the military modelling world, in some areas, they don't like silver anymore. They like to sort of build up a silver using other colours rather than a neat metallic silver. And I suppose that's the same with the whole non-metallic metals sort of fans. That it's still a thing really in the miniature world too. I did some non-metallic metals years ago, but I haven't really continued the theme. And it just takes a long time. It's not really great for high volume armies to get stuff onto a table. So that's the definition of a pin wash there. I'm not being as slapdash as I've been on some other areas. And it is going in around the rivets and the edging. And obviously you can sort of jump to the conclusion that metallic sharpies are a useful addition to the toolbox. All right, I haven't got one of those. Vallejo metals are really good. I've got some of those, and and I made a mistake when I bought them, thinking that they were normal acrylics, but I think they need alcohol thinners. I don't know what they were called, but I haven't used them since. It's terrible. I should sell them on eBay or something. Yeah, so I'm taking care now to do pin washes as a pin wash should be done, which is just sort of letting it do the work for me, just sort of pressing into the edge of a panel and then letting it run away with itself rather than me sort of brushing it all over like I have been doing so far. So this is the sort of careful bit. Well, for the most part. And this tends to be sometimes how I work, is that, you know, I will mention that sometimes I do things where I do paint something and spend more time on a certain detail than on other models. I'm smearing away there, I can see. Oops. You can see how much more slapdash that was on that main area, but you can still sort of use the thinners to pull some off and spread it around. So I accidentally got my finger on that bit, splattered it. And you can see I put a load in that middle section. That's going to take ages to dry, and it's all a bit too strong. So all of that needs just some work with the thinners. I've just done it again, put my finger on it. Okay, so just on the top there, just touch there. Oops, I've gone a bit too much on it, but it will run down the side there. And you see it sort of starts to trace its way down a little bit more, and then it's away. Yeah, so when done right, a pin wash kind of does the job for you. As you can see over here, where I've dropped it on to some of these areas inside, it's really made the detail pop out, because I'm not splashing it all over as much as I was doing on the floor panel areas. Of course, I can be a bit more generous around the top of there, because later on I can weather this to pieces along the top, as in have oil and stuff running off it. So having a bit of an overspill of this pin wash around the top section is not the end of the world. It'll all dirty up when I do the chipping stage, which will be probably at this weekend, I would have thought, because during this week I'll have a couple more days where I'm doing this pin wash kind of stuff, and then I'll probably be the weekend when I'm doing the chipping, and then if I'm lucky, I'll have all these 4 modular bases done by Sunday, and dull coated as well to get this gloss off them. So gone on a bit heavier there. Oh, and there's a grill there. So go for it a bit in the grill and just splash it in. Let's do that little bit there. See, it's probably too much detail putting on now, but at the bottom of those bottles have got a ridge on them. So that's an example of where I've just splashed it on, but then I'll be able to rub that off and it will look quite subtle on those bottles when that's rubbed off. Right, so now this is because it's had a few minutes while I was painting the rest. I'm going to drink some tea. I've got some tea down me. And now I'm going to use the bigger brush, and I'm going to use some of this cleanish, look, it's still a bit grimy, thinners, but it doesn't matter that it's a bit grimy. The thinners is expensive stuff. I mean, you can get cheaper thinners, so you don't want to just waste it. So try and get into an angle where there's not too much light reflecting off it. Zoom in, and you can see straight away some good candidates for cleanup that just looks ropey over the back here. Because it does still smear some of it on, but oops. And then you pick up some on your brush and then you smear it even more. Down there I'm not too happy, I'll just sort of move that around a bit. Just need it to look a little more subtle inside the edges. See, that's badly done. But you just sort of get another clean bit of the stuff and then down it's gone. Same applies over there, but that's kind of just darkened and looks sort of okay. You know, you can smear it off as well. Of course, it's already starting to make some of the decals that I put on the other day, which are in another video, look a little bit more natural and less stuck on. Oh, there's another candidate for sort of tidy up, really. This edge here doesn't, it's got blackened. Down there doesn't look too subtle, it looks a bit strong in the groove. Over there too. A bit too dark. Yeah, so anyway, I really enjoy painting, and this sort of painting is great, and I'm only filling the airtime with my voice because we all know dead air is a crime, but I could put some calming music on, but then you get hit for copyright and things. Although some people do have music on channels. I think the problem with music is some people like heavy rock, and others are quite happy with like new age wind chimes, and you'll never get an audience that like the two things at once, so best to avoid it. So I'll just chat away occasionally and talk about what I'm doing, even though sometimes it feels like I'm talking nonsense, but there you go. Oh, been attacked by a moth. So you can see the whole thing looks like it's popped a little bit more, and it does. I mean, the shine, unfortunately, you will see shine, and that's just with the drying oils and things, and that does distract a little bit. There I can see, just I don't like that sharp edge on the shadow down there. I'll just make it a little bit more subtle in there. But you could push this oil around forever if you like, well, until it's dried. So that's it, really. I mean, I've just noticed probably this is almost like going to be a reverse dry brush. So I'm taking off, I've used some thinners on there, and I just want to reveal the upper layer of there. The risk is, of course, I could end up picking up some of the oil that's gone in. If I do that a few times with some thinners, dry the thinners off so I'm not splashing a load of thinners into the holes again, it is sort of revealing some of the more shiny aspects of the metal plate that I painted silver before, and leaving it in the holes. If there's anything really on this that needs to be pulled back off, but there's some bits around that pipe that could just be drawn in a bit. Not much. Oh, look, there's a little smidge in there, big deal. And the same goes for this pipe work, really, because it's a pipe. I'm not really bothered at all about its condition. And look, I could draw the brush down again inside there, almost like the reverse of a dry brush, taking the oil off some of the highlighted areas, leaving it in the shadows. I particularly like bits like this here, just because it works. I mean, it's shiny at the moment with the oil in the corners, but once that's dull coated, it'll look great, and I could even do more chipping and staining around there as well. Non-commercial royalty-free music. Yeah. Oh, well, actually, I do have another string to my bow that's a bit of an effort, but I have another channel on YouTube where I do music, and I use old analog synthesizers and things, and they're all kind of packed away at the moment because there's no room. But so the channel died a death, but I didn't want to put my terrible music, because some of it is awful. I didn't really want to put that on my normal YouTube channel, so I created another one for it when I got into these analog synthesizers. There kind of was a renaissance for analog synths, that sort of German early synthesizer type music, and companies like Korg and Roland started reproducing their synthesizers from the 70s and 80s and making them into these sort of mini kits that you could use. So I started to play around with those. So I could actually do my own music, but it would be quite grim because I'm not that great. I'm what they call a filter twiddler, because I just make a sound and then fiddle with all these various voltage controlled operators that make it squeal in different noises. So it doesn't make for very good long-term listening. But if you did want to look at the other channel, you can go and have a real laugh. and me making noises. Right, so I don't know if that was in view, but I just went onto those bottles and just did the same thing where I smeared off the worst of the oil and left it on there in the areas that I wanted it to be. And they'll dry out quite nicely and look kind of weathered and old. It's probably a bit on the side of there. So let's bring the whole thing together now, because I've had enough tonight. It's 10 o'clock. So, I mean, I've made pretty good progress though. And I'm happy. I had a real effort when I was doing the decals, because it's really hard putting on camera when I'm putting all these graffiti decals and things on, and trying to hold these in a position where you could see me getting into areas like down there, and me then trying to do the placement of the decals on there, and it was just bad news. All my motor neuron skills went, because I was constantly thinking, is it in camera? Is it in the frame? Maybe, yes. And then struggling to just with my hands to try and get these decals on there, water slides. But I managed to do it, but I actually removed the video afterwards on Facebook, because it was 2 hours of basically a man struggling to do anything. So yeah, it all has a bit of a shine, which will disappear. I need to do chipping that will bring it all together. I need to do the concrete as well. I'll show you what I did on the ones I did before. I did just some edges. So I just highlighted up some edges and did some washes. And these ones are hex shaped, but the other ones are squares. But I just pick out some bits like that and stain it. So I didn't want to distract from the whole model with too much detail. But one thing I will be doing with this is adding little tufts of grass and things into corners, and I'd forgotten I wanted to do that. Just to sort of make it look like some of it, someone's forgotten to dig up a weed against the old factory. So you can see all around. I put some smearing around some oil barrels there, and that's as far as I go on the terrain base, because I think it's kind of distracting if you do too much shading and paneling. So I just did like the lights caught on just a couple of corners of the hexes, and then some of it's washed and some stains and things on there. That was about as far as I went with the basing, and that's what I'm going to do. On the edge of these large tile bits here too, I'll just catch the light on a couple, but not do them on every one, because that would just look crazy. Imagine if I put every corner highlighted up, it would just wouldn't look right. But I do want it to just signify that there is a bit of an edge to it, so I will be doing that. Sounds perfect for a 40k channel and the grim dark. You have to use some non-commercial. Yeah. I had thought about that. You can make some really dark, creepy noises with these synthesizers, like Doctor Who's original soundtrack and things. And that was done by the BBC orchestra, wasn't it? And they had access to some of the best sort of synthesizers in the world back in whenever that was, 50s. Yeah, road markings. Yeah, I guess I could stencil on a couple of like markings up here, like parking markings or something. That's a great idea, Graham. Now you've given me more work. I can see like 2 parking lines or like directions to say, that's where you're going to have to go, but don't drive up and park here when you should be in a straight line or something. I don't know. Don't really know how to do that, but I'd probably use an airbrush. So those are those doors, and you can see they look kind of grimy, but I have pulled the worst of the dark stuff off there. The whole thing's looking a lot grimier, and when the chipping goes on, that will be good. But I will be doing a couple of edge highlights. That's what I do with the chipping, and I'll show you on the other complete one. Try and find an area of it that I can do the. Yeah, thanks. I did sort of go along a couple of areas along the edges of windows and things just to sort of highlight up. So it does look all sort of grimy and dirty, but then just the odd little highlight on edges sort of brought it in. Didn't spend a long time doing it, but yeah, I even like went down the edges here with a bit of a highlight. And this one has triangle base. Again, I did put a couple of them in a different colour just to break up the pattern, but I didn't spend a long time on it because again, you know, who cares for that? Don't really want to spend a long time. I think there's a dog hair there. Yeah, so this one's been done a month or so, and yeah, it's had a few games on there as well. Yeah, so if you haven't seen this before, when I did this, I accidentally come across a weird technique, which was I was sealing the MDF underneath here with PVA, so I was painting it with PVA before it was all painted, and I'd already glued in these windows, but not the plastic in there. But when the PVA went on thickly, it started to pool in the leading in the windows. And when I saw that happen once, I went, ooh, and then I went a bit stronger with it in various other ones where I used a blob of PVA, thinned down a little bit, and then just let it ride into these areas. Now, if I'd done that as a last step, I could have actually left the PVA and not sprayed it grey that I ended up doing with these, but I could have left it clear so the PVA would have looked like leaded windows. And I have no idea if that was the intention because I've not seen anybody on the interweb of wargaming are making these MDF buildings use that, but you could go on every one with a drop of slightly thinned down PVA and it will pool and create glass work in there for you, but it would be a lot of work. I say with this one, this is another one from Sarisa Precision, and all I did differently is it would have had 3 glass roof sections, and I made this from a piece of plastic card and put that in there so that I could fit models on the roof. It's all getting a little bit scuffed up now, but yes, it's still looking good though. And so that allowed me to put models in there. And this was from Brigade Models in the UK. I think it's an external toilet or something, but I thought it's got a door on there, so why not use it as some sort of slightly modernised entranceway onto the rooftop. In fact, on the Sarisa website, I'll tell you what I was looking at over the weekend. If I switch to it, momentarily back to my face, I think. There it is. And then on to the raspberry one I prepared earlier. So this is the Sarisa website. They're based in Nottingham, and I incorrectly said that they're based in Scotland, but I think the owner is Scottish. But there's the factory which I just showed, and I put the ladder. I do have that piece on the other section of terrain, and I've matched it up exactly so it can go on the side. But you can see it has the 3 sections on the roof, and I've only used 2, and I cut that off and put a flat roof in there so I could game on that a bit more. But I was looking, and I like that movie. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but the Battle Angel movie. It was like a cartoon, and she had like manga big eyes, and she was like a robot in the future. But it's a weird, quirky future where it kind of looks like a rundown, you know, Blade Runner-esque, modern, super modern sci-fi city, but you've still got the old buildings mixed in with modern pipework and things. And I thought, under 15mm in his World War Europe 15mm, there's a church, and there is actually like a church or temple or something in that film, but I wasn't specifically inspired by it. But this rundown church, I had in mind to sci-fi something like this up so that it looks like, you know, it's got pipes coming out the side, air conditioning units, but I would probably take 2 of the roof sections and flatten them and leave bits of debris, but then leave it open so you can put models on the top and game on it. and yeah, and literally use it then, have a pipe coming out of the top, maybe a satellite dish or something, paneling up one side, metalwork, rusting, so it doesn't all look wooden frame. But yeah, lose maybe this section on the front right down to just leaving a little tiny bit of low wall there, and then flatten the roof with some metal base plate stuff on there, which I do on all the other models, which I can show you again actually if I go back. Not back to me, back to there. And yeah, I just put that material in that gives it that look. So I could give it a metal roof, maybe some rusting old aircon fans on the top of that church, and that would then be a playable piece, really, as in you can put models on it, it's blocking terrain, plus it's somewhere where you could use for elevation in a game, even maybe to the point, and it would be nice to be able to have something, probably if you turn it around the other side, but he hasn't got it, but probably the back of that is collapsed. You can sort of see through it, doesn't have walls on the back. So maybe you can pop a model in there too, so you can have models on maybe this side and then this side, make into a flat area with like a low wall crumbling bits, and then sci-fi the whole thing up with weird massive industrial tubes coming out of it. But don't want to go completely gothic, otherwise it will look a bit too 40k. Yeah, but blended into sort of modern, still trying to think of the word for it, but modern retro Blade Runner-esque style. So here's what I'm working on tonight, and the final kind of just quick review. So it's drying off slowly now. In fact, it's looking less glossy, and the pin wash has picked out a lot of the detail for me. It's not forensically super good, but it's and that wash of that black that I did earlier on up there is just nicely shaded that a little bit more. That's been done, but it needs chipping and weathering on there as well. And just generally it's looking okay. I didn't want to, there's a workshop brass etch piece up there and this other one on this side here, and I ended up really in a quandary because I didn't want any more bright colours on it, and I thought I could just do in a dull grey that it stands out, but I've just left them there washed, and I will weather and chip them as well, like rusting old signs kind of thing, and I think they'll look a little bit nicer when that's done. But I haven't gone to town because I just thought I could do them in a bright colour, and I just thought no, I've got enough bright colours on there. It will start looking really like a box of jelly beans or something with so many bright different colours. So I've just left them white with the sort of pin wash around the edge. You can still see it says workshop, and then once I've weathered and rusted around there and chipped it up, it should look okay. Yeah, just imagine placing a church wall with that hex sheet with acrylic colour hexes inserted. Yeah, that could work. Like one side wall has come down and then someone's brought a prefabricated pop-up plastic sheet that just pops up on there. That looks good. And Graham, no, I haven't seen the cargo lifts on foreground. The foreground are out of business now though, aren't they, I think? Still don't know where that stands. We talked about that before on a previous show, live stream. So here we go. We got a guy on the rooftop with an RPG ready to fire. We can move around these various areas as well. And let's put some other models on there just before I pack up. I've got my tray of models here. Yeah, so I could even have, I've got a specialist group here which are like a laser rifle team. They fit on there on a nice larger round base. Put them in different positions. So the whole thing's been built so that I can move things around. You know, and there's a larger squad there as well on a group base, and then they can have a leader attached. Plus they could have another RPG as part of that squad on there. And foreground's still in business. I thought the website had gone down, and there was like an insolvency notice up. Well, the website was down a week ago, but it might be back up now. And if I put a robot there as well, even that can fit nicely to gain some elevation on there. Sort of mecha walker. Yeah. Well, it's quite a long way off from being finished, but it's kind of nearly there, really, isn't it? It's kind of nearly there. It's not a lot, some chipping and stuff on there, and it will be. And then obviously, like I said, I need to sort of do some weathering to edge a couple of these tiles and put some stains and things on there, and should be done. They've put a post on Facebook page. Okay, they're back in action. The other piece, which I haven't shown tonight, is just the other one of these that has got. I've put larger walls. These are actually 28mm doors from Antonosity's workshop that I resin, and I've put them on the side, but they just look like larger doors that would allow a mech walker out of there, or some large whatever they make. In fact, I used some of the Games Workshop contrast to weather some of the rust into the bottom of there. It needs more work, but that's just starting off. I need to do chipping and things. And otherwise this hasn't had its pin washes, although I did some washing on here with some of the acrylic based weathering stuff from Life Colour. But really I need to attack this with pin washes like I've done on the other base tonight, and it has its own roof section as well here, which is ready for pin washing too. Just slightly different. The other one has got a smaller barrel thing, a little air conditioner unit I put on there. That air conditioner was from Battlefront Miniatures, part of one of their resin kits for Team Yankee. And when they produce the resin kits, they actually do detailed plastic bits or inside that are unpainted. It was just grey plastic. So I stuck that on there like a sort of a rooftop air conditioning unit. I had a couple of other aircon units here too. One on there that's stuck on. That one I've done the text, obviously I've painted. And this one I spent ages in the last video, embarrassingly, painting this lab thing. Took me forever. Took me too long for a video to make the video of any use to watch, unless you really like to feel the pain of watching someone struggle to paint something. Go back to watch my video from the weekend, and I spent too long just painting that stupid thing. So that's that one. Oh, and the containers. Which the container yard is my favourite of the set, really. And these are from thescene.co.uk, and they're 15mm sci-fi containers. They're all resin. This weighs a bloody ton. It's the heaviest, most awkward one to use. And I went a bit far. I foolishly went ahead of myself. I weathered this last week, like middle of the week last week, or the week before that. And really I hadn't painted any of the others, and I should have done it in stages. So I've done all the airbrushing, and then all the weathering, then all the decals, then all the weathering, but I didn't. I just sort of dived in there. You can see all the decals are all looking a bit clean because they've all been placed on there, but there's been no oil washing or pin washing on there. So they need to be weathered up to bring it all in. So I quite like this bit here. Two bits I like with this base. Well, firstly, the other one thing I did do is, just like I said before with the other one, I've made lots of areas for models to gain cover plus elevation when they're playing on this, plus they can still walk through, so it's not a completely blocking piece of terrain. But things I like, I put that graffiti decal on there, and I just thought that's quite nice because someone would climb up and do that. So there's a little bit of realism about that. And also I like the skip having that on the side there, and that's from Brigade Models in the UK. That's a 3D printed skip that they sell, and having the Maersk logo behind there, I just think that adds a little bit of realism when something's hidden from view. That's quite good. Yeah, and another bit of graffiti over there, but all these will take a nice weathering and then chipping, and I'm going to go to town on chipping on these as well. But not too much to town because I want to get the job done. So there you go. So it's now nearly 10:30, so I'm going to finish up. So that's Teresa. Great, so thanks if you stuck with me tonight, and if you're just viewing at another time, sorry you didn't catch me live, but it's not always a great thing to watch this live because you're going to have to spend nearly 2 hours watching it, so watch it afterwards and speed forward to various sections so you can get through the junk that I waffle about the whole time. But please obviously subscribe if you do like this sort of thing, and I welcome comments in particular, because if you want to see something, and while I'm doing it live, obviously I take ideas from people and I'm happy to experiment. If someone says why don't you do this and I've got the right materials to hand, I will use it and give it a go. So thanks very much for listening if you have. Cheers. I'm now going to hit the stop stream. Good night.